I waited 3 days in that hospital bed, 3 full days, hooked up to wires, heart still trembling from the scare. And not a single soul came through that door. Not my son. Not his wife. Not even a call to ask if I was still breathing. The nurse asked if I had any family she could notify, and I said no. I lied. I had a son. But he chose not to have me. That night, I signed my own discharge papers. And the next morning, I didn't go home. I went straight to the bank. It was time. People say time flies, but I remember those early years with Matthew like they're stitched into my bones. Every morning started at 5 a.m., coffee, a glance at Marjorie's photo on the mantel, and then off to the hardware store I managed for nearly 30 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it kept food on the table. After Marjorie passed, God rest her soul, it was just me and the boy. He was only 9. I remember how small his hands were, how tightly he held on to mine at her funeral. Losing her nearly broke me. But I had Matthew. And that gave me reason to keep breathing. I used to make him pancakes on Saturdays, blueberries if I could afford them, plain if not. He'd sit at the kitchen table, legs swinging, wearing that faded Batman hoodie. He always said, "Thanks, Dad," even if the pancakes were burnt. He was a good kid. Thoughtful. Kind. Or maybe I just saw what I wanted to see. Every evening after work, no matter how tired I was, we'd do homework together at the kitchen table. I never understood half of it, algebra might as well have been Greek, but I sat there, reading manuals and pretending to understand until he finished. That mattered to me. Being there mattered. I taught him how to mow the lawn, change the oil in the car, fix a leaky faucet. The simple things. He used to follow me around like a shadow, always asking questions. Why do you fold the tarp like that? How come the tomatoes have to be watered at night? He listened. Back then, he listened. I still remember his 8th grade graduation. He wore that clip-on tie crooked, and when they called his name, he looked out into the crowd and smiled straight at me. Just me. I clapped so hard my hands stung. He got a partial scholarship to college. I sold my old truck to cover the rest. Didn't blink. Didn't hesitate. I drove him upstate in a borrowed van and helped carry his boxes up to the dorm. He hugged me in front of everyone, tight, like a kid again, and said, "I'll make you proud, Dad." And I believed him. He called often at first. Weekly check-ins. Stories about classes, roommates, professors he admired. I listened to every word, sitting in my old recliner with the phone pressed close, picturing his world. He'd come home for holidays, always with a bag of laundry and a tired smile. I'd have the house spotless, his favorite stew simmering on the stove. When he graduated, I cried. I didn't care that it wasn't some fancy Ivy League name on the diploma. It was his name on it, and that was enough. He stood there, cap in hand, beaming. "We did it, Dad," he said. We. He met Nicole a year later. Smart, polished, came from money, real money. Her father owned some kind of investment firm. I remember the first dinner we all had together. She complimented the food but didn't finish her plate. Called my house quaint. It stung, but I laughed it off. Matthew seemed happy. That was what mattered. They moved in together before the wedding. I didn't say a word, even though it twisted something in my gut. Marjorie would have had a few sharp words about it, I'm sure, but I stayed silent. Times change, right? The wedding was tasteful, elegant, and cold. I was seated in the back, far from the family table. Matthew didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. Still, I smiled through the photos, toasted with cheap champagne, and went home alone to an empty house. But even then, I made excuses for him. He's busy. Marriage is stressful. he'll come around. And sometimes, he did. We'd go months without much more than a text, and then he'd call out of the blue, ask if I could help fix a sink or co-sign something, just temporarily. I always said yes. Because that's what fathers do. Because I remembered the boy in the Batman hoodie. The one who held my hand at Marjorie's grave. Now, I wonder if he remembers any of that. If he ever thinks about those nights we stayed up past bedtime, building model rockets on the dining room table. Or the summer we spent sanding down that old rowboat just to take it fishing one last time before he left for school. I poured every ounce of myself into raising him. And for a while, it felt like it mattered. Like he saw me. Needed me. Respected me. But slowly, things shifted. The calls got shorter. The favors turned into expectations. The gratitude faded into silence. And I told myself it was fine. I told myself love didn't need thank yous. That a father's job wasn't to be appreciated, it was just to be there. I wish Marjorie were here. She always saw things I missed. Maybe she would have warned me. Maybe she would have helped me see what was coming. Instead, I sat in that house year after year, waiting for a knock that came less and less often. And then one day, it stopped altogether. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing people don't understand. Betrayal rarely crashes in like a storm, it leaks in, drip by drip, until the floorboards beneath your feet are rotten and you didn't even notice the smell. At first, it was the phone calls. He used to call every Sunday, even if it was just for 5 minutes. Then Sundays became Mondays. Then not at all. Work's been crazy, he'd say if I brought it up. You know how it is. I didn't. I'd been working full-time since I was 17, and I still made time for him. The visits changed too. When he came by, Nicole never got out of the car. She'd sit there in her sunglasses, engine running. Sometimes she didn't even look up. Once, I brought out a slice of the lemon pound cake she used to like, and she waved it away like I was offering her a used tissue. Matthew would stay for 15, maybe 20 minutes. We'd sit on the porch, me sipping coffee, him scrolling on his phone. I'd try to talk about the tomatoes or the roof I was patching up. He'd nod absently, never looking up. And then there were the favors. They started small. Can you help us with a little down payment? Just a short-term loan. I wired over $5,000 from my savings. A few months later, it was another short-term boost. Nicole's car needed repairs. Then the vet bill. Then, just to get ahead on credit cards. Each time, he promised to pay me back. Each time, I said not to worry about it. But I started to worry. Not about the money, I'd have given him every last dime if he needed it, but about the tone in his voice. There was no more hesitation. No more, "Are you sure, Dad?" Just expectation. Like he was reading off a grocery list. Then one evening, I overheard something that sat heavy in my gut. I was returning from the backyard with a bag of clippings when I paused by the open kitchen window. Matthew and Nicole were inside, chatting over wine. Nicole said, "Once the house is in our name, we can redo the kitchen, knock out that ugly wall." Matthew laughed. "We'll get him to sign. He won't say no." I stood frozen in place. Once the house is in our name. They'd never asked me that. Not directly. But clearly, they'd talked about it. Planned for it. I didn't say anything. I walked inside like I hadn't heard a word. I even smiled, asked if they wanted coffee. Nicole declined, said she was gluten-free now. Coffee has no gluten. But I didn't push it. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about Marjorie again. We bought this house together. Scraped and saved every dollar. I remembered how we painted the nursery before Matthew was born, soft green walls, little duck prints on the border. This wasn't just a house. It was our whole history. And now it was a line item in someone else's renovation plan. The little things kept piling up. One day, Matthew corrected me at dinner, sharply, in front of Nicole. "Dad, that's not how it happened." I'd been telling a story from his childhood, one he used to love. But now, apparently, I was misremembering. I let it slide. At a cookout a few weeks later, one of Nicole's cousins asked me if I was still managing okay on your own. She said it with a syrupy tone, as if I were some ancient relic. "Nicole says you might be ready for assisted living soon." Assisted living? No one had said anything to me. When I brought it up to Matthew, he waved it off. "She's just looking out for you. Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive. That word stuck in my ribs like a splinter. I'd buried a wife, raised a son, worked until my joints begged for mercy, and now I was sensitive. I started noticing how they looked at my things, the furniture, the art Marjorie painted, the silver tray from our wedding. Nicole once asked, casually, "Do you have a will already set up?" I nodded, but didn't offer details. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. I began to feel like a guest in my own life. Like I was slowly being phased out. And they weren't even trying to hide it. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night, hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. I stared at the chair Marjorie used to sit in during dinner, her fingers tapping lightly against the rim of her glass when she laughed. The silence in that room was louder than any argument. I wanted to believe it was unintentional. That they were just busy, overwhelmed, distracted. But deep down, I knew better. They were building a life, and I wasn't part of it. I wasn't even a consideration. Still, I said nothing. Because saying something would make it real. And I wasn't ready yet to admit that the boy who once clung to my hand in parking lots was now someone I didn't fully recognize. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm, breezy, one of those days when the air smells like cut grass and memory. I just finished deadheading the roses in the front yard when I heard laughter coming from the backyard. Laughter I didn't recognize. I rounded the side of the house and froze. There were at least 20 people on my back lawn, most of them strangers. Folding chairs set out. A couple of grills fired up. Coolers full of drinks. Children running barefoot through my flower beds. Nicole stood by the patio, laughing with someone in a crisp polo shirt. Matthew was flipping burgers, wearing my old apron, the one Marjorie embroidered years ago. I stood there for a long moment, uninvited in my own yard. When Matthew finally noticed me, his smile faltered for half a second. Then he called out, "Hey Dad. We didn't think you'd be home." "I live here," I said, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. Nicole didn't even turn around. He walked over, flipping his spatula casually. "Nicole's cousin is visiting from out of town. We thought we'd have a few people over." I looked around. "A few?" He gave a sheepish shrug. "Didn't think it'd be a big deal. You were usually out Sundays." I wasn't. That was the lie they told themselves. The truth was, they never asked. I turned back toward the house without saying another word. The screen door creaked behind me, and I sat in the dim kitchen while the sound of laughter floated through the windows. I could hear someone calling out for more hot dogs. Someone else shouted, "This place is perfect for parties." My place. The walls that held Marjorie's voice. The garden we built together, one stone at a time. The swing set Matthew used to tumble off of, running inside with scraped knees and tears that only I could wipe away. Now it was background scenery for strangers sipping seltzers. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the sun had dipped behind the trees, I stepped outside again. Paper plates littered the lawn. A half-eaten burger sat on the porch railing, flies already gathering. One of the flower beds had been trampled. I knelt to inspect it. Marjorie's lilies, her favorite, snapped and crushed under careless feet. My chest ached. Matthew walked up, holding a trash bag. "Sorry about the mess. We'll clean it up." I didn't respond. Nicole appeared behind him, arms crossed. "It was just a barbecue." I looked up. "You didn't ask." She shrugged. "You weren't using the space." It made sense. Those words landed like stones. You weren't using the space. No apology. No recognition that maybe, just maybe, they had crossed a line. Matthew looked between us, awkward, silent. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Let's not turn this into a thing, okay?" I stood. "It is a thing." Nicole narrowed her eyes. "You're overreacting." And that was when I saw it clearly. There was no misunderstanding. No generational gap or communication error. They didn't see me as a person anymore. Just an obstacle. A holder of keys they hadn't yet taken. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of tea and the ripped flower stems I'd gathered from the yard. I thought about the time I taught Matthew how to prune roses, how carefully he held the clippers, how proud he was when the first bloom opened weeks later. I thought about Marjorie's voice, soft and steady, saying, "One day, this house will be his. And he'll remember how much we poured into it." Would he? Because right now, all I saw was someone standing on the edge of my memories with a bulldozer in hand. The next morning, I found an email from Nicole in my inbox. "FYI, our contractor friend wants to stop by Thursday to look at the deck. Don't worry, we'll handle the cost." Our contractor. The deck. It wasn't even subtle anymore. I didn't reply. I didn't yell. I didn't even call. I just printed the email, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer where I kept things that hurt too much to face straight on. That week, I stopped tending the garden. I left the dishes in the sink. I sat on the porch and watched the sun rise and fall, wondering when exactly I had stopped being a father and become a burden. No one else seemed to notice. The mailman waved as he passed, the neighbor's dog barked as usual, and the world just kept on spinning. But inside me, something had changed. A silence deeper than any I'd known before had taken root. And from that silence, something else began to grow. Not anger. Not yet. Just grief. For a son who was no longer mine. A week later, I walked out to get the mail and noticed an envelope addressed to Matthew, care of my own home address. He'd started using it for more than just visits now, bank letters, packages, even doctor's notices. At first, I didn't think much of it. But something about this envelope felt off. Heavy stock paper. Embossed seal. Legal looking. I didn't mean to open it. I really didn't. But my name was on the return address label too. Some law office in town. I hesitated. Then I opened it. Inside was a draft contract. A preliminary property transfer agreement. My house. My name. All filled in. With a note attached in Nicole's neat, looping handwriting, "Matthew, review and sign after you talk to your dad. If we get this settled soon, we can make an offer on the lake house." The lake house. I stood at the kitchen counter with the paper in my hand, my coffee growing cold, my hands suddenly not steady. I'd always assumed, no, hoped, that they were just careless. That the comments, the parties, the entitlement were just immature moments. But this was a plan. Thought out. Written up. Moving forward. Without me. I put the paper back in the envelope and slid it into the back of the junk drawer. Then I went upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed, the bed Marjorie and I shared for over 30 years, and I didn't move for a long time. It wasn't just property to me. It was the last physical thing we built together. Every corner held echoes, her laugh in the hallway, the way she'd hum in the kitchen while making soup, the dent in the wood floor from when Matthew knocked over the coat rack pretending to be a pirate. It was ours. And now they were passing it around like a chess piece in a game I wasn't invited to. Later that afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found a folder lying open on the table. Nicole had left her work stuff out again. I was about to close it when the title on one of the pages caught my eye, Long-Term Care Facilities Near You. There were printouts. Circled addresses. Notes in the margins, clean, affordable, staff ratio 1:6, monthly cost lower if paid from sale. Sale. Of what, exactly? I felt something tighten in my chest. Like a door I didn't even know was open had just slammed shut. I heard them talking that evening when they didn't know I was still up. Nicole's voice was sharp, clipped. He's getting slower. Did you see how he forgot the thermostat yesterday? He's just tired, Matthew said. No, Matt. He's slipping. We need to get ahead of this. If we wait too long, it'll be harder legally. Legally. I stood in the hallway, listening. My hands clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. And still, I said nothing. The next morning, I walked around the house with different eyes. I looked at the photos on the wall, ones they'd never ask about. The dishes I still washed by hand. The calendar with notes to myself, like, check on Marjorie's roses, or, call Emily for her birthday. They didn't see those things. To them, I was a checklist. A transition plan. A house with equity. That night, I went into the attic to get the old photo boxes. And while I was up there, I found Marjorie's letters. She used to write me notes, even after we were married. Little things. Thanks for fixing the porch, love. The flowers look beautiful. Or, saw you watching Matthew sleep last night. You're such a good father. I sat up there for hours, rereading her handwriting, letting her voice hold me together. It hit me then, this wasn't just neglect. It was betrayal. Planned. Whispered. Documented. I began watching closely after that. Listening to their tones. Noticing when they'd stop talking if I walked into a room. Nicole started leaving her laptop open on the counter, spreadsheets titled Q3 Finances, with tabs labeled Equity Allocation. I wasn't a man to them anymore. I was an asset. Something to be moved. Managed. Forgotten. One night, I stood in the kitchen alone and looked out the window toward the backyard. The wind was moving through the trees, rustling the leaves the way Marjorie used to when she walked past with her garden clippers. I could almost see her there, kneeling in the dirt, wiping sweat from her brow, smiling up at me. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was apologizing to her or to myself. And then, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear, but it turned into something clearer. Sharper. Resolve. They had plans? So did I. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. It took me 3 days to decide to confront him. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to be calm. Measured. I didn't want to yell, or accuse. I wanted to see him. The real him. Not the boy I remembered, but the man standing in front of me now. He came by on a Thursday to pick up some tools from the garage. I invited him to stay for dinner. Nicole was tied up with a conference call, so it was just the two of us. Like old times. I made beef stew, his favorite as a kid. He didn't compliment it. Barely touched the potatoes. Halfway through the meal, I set my spoon down and said, I found the documents, Matthew. He looked up, confused, or pretending to be. What documents? I held his gaze. The property transfer agreement. And the care facility brochures. His jaw tensed. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Dad, it's not what you think. Then explain it, I said. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Look, Nicole's just trying to plan ahead. We're trying to be responsible. You're getting older. I'm not dead yet, I snapped, sharper than I intended. He held up his hands. I didn't say that. But you're forgetful. Slower. You've fallen behind on the bills before. We're just trying to help. Help? I said. By signing over my house? Without a conversation? Without respect? His voice got colder. We thought you'd be reasonable about it. You don't need this much space anymore. And honestly, Nicole and I, we're trying to build a family. You always said you wanted grandkids running through this house. This house isn't a playground for your ambition, I said. It's my home. That's when I saw it, something flicker in his eyes. Annoyance. Not shame. Not regret. Just irritation that I was being difficult. He looked away. You're being stubborn. And you're being greedy. Silence fell between us. Long, uncomfortable. I've always been here for you, I said, more quietly now. Do you remember that? When your mother died, who held your hand? When you couldn't afford textbooks, who sold his truck? I didn't do that for repayment. I did it out of love. But this feels like robbery. His eyes darted to the stew. Maybe we should talk about this later. No, I said. We're talking now. And then he said something I'll never forget. It's just a house, Dad. That line didn't just hurt, it severed something inside me. Because only someone who never understood what this place meant could say that. Only someone who'd already let go of the love tied to it. He left soon after. Didn't finish dinner. Didn't say goodbye. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox and found a flyer rubber-banded to the post, thinking of downsizing? We can help. There was a picture of a smiling elderly couple and a number to call. At the bottom, someone had scribbled in pencil, might be time to consider this, Mr. Hall. No signature. But I had a good idea who planted it. That same day, Paul, my neighbor, came by with a rake and a warm apple pie. He didn't say much, just asked if I needed help with the front leaves. As we worked, he glanced at the house and said, "They still living here with you?" I nodded. He shook his head. "I've heard them talking in town. Like they're already on the deed." I didn't answer. Paul handed me a rake. "You're a good man, Henry. Don't let them take that from you." That evening, I sat on the porch, staring out over the garden. I pulled out a notebook. Began writing down everything I knew, dates, amounts loaned, little things said and done. I wasn't sure what it would lead to, but I needed to document it. Needed to see the whole picture with clear eyes. That's when I remembered something Marjorie once said during a rough patch in our marriage. We were arguing about something, I can't even remember what, and she said, "Henry, love without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment." I hadn't understood it then. I did now. The next morning, I made an appointment with Mr. Lavin, my old friend and lawyer. I didn't tell Matthew or Nicole. I didn't cancel. I didn't hesitate. It was time to draw the line. Mr. Lavin hadn't changed much in the 15 years since I'd last stepped into his office. A little slower on the draw, maybe, and his white mustache had fully surrendered to time. But his handshake was still firm, his eyes still sharp. He looked up when I walked in and said, "Well now, this isn't a social visit, is it?" I shook my head and sat down. He didn't push. Just poured me a cup of lukewarm coffee from a dented thermos and waited. "I need to change my will," I said. He blinked, leaned back in his creaky chair. "All right. What are we changing?" I slid a folded paper across the desk, a handwritten outline I'd scribbled the night before. He read it over, his eyebrows rising as he reached the bottom. No provision for your son? No. You sure about that? No, I said honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. He nodded slowly. You want to talk about it? I'd rather not. He didn't pry. Just adjusted his glasses and got to work. It took nearly 2 hours. I asked for a clause I'd never considered before: if anyone contested the will, especially Matthew, all assets would be forfeited and donated to the Veterans Housing Initiative in town. The house, the savings, even the furniture. Everything. Harsh, Mr. Lavin said, pen poised. Necessary, I replied. He drafted it all with quiet precision. Occasionally, he'd ask a question, and I'd nod or shake my head. At one point, he paused and said, I remember when you brought Marjorie in here. You two were so aligned. Like you shared the same thoughts. I smiled faintly. She'd hate all of this. But she'd understand. We finished around noon. I signed the document slowly, hand trembling just slightly, not from doubt, but from weight. The weight of history, of memory, of letting go. Mr. Lavin stood and extended his hand again. You know, Henry, you're not the first father to walk through this door with a broken heart. But you might be the first who's turning it into something useful. On the walk home, I felt lighter. Not joyful, not even close, but more grounded. Like I'd stepped out of a fog I hadn't realized I'd been lost in. I stopped by the bakery on the way back and picked up a loaf of Marjorie's favorite rye. She always said bread helped her think. I sat on the porch later, buttering a slice, watching the afternoon light settle on the porch rail like it used to on her shoulders. The house was quiet when I returned. Nicole was gone. Matthew was upstairs, I guessed, probably working or pretending to. I walked into my room, opened the nightstand drawer, and slipped the copy of the new will beside Marjorie's letters. Then I sat down and took a breath that felt final. Like closing a book I never wanted to end, but couldn't keep reading. Later that evening, as I made myself a small dinner, Matthew walked into the kitchen. Hey, he said. I nodded. He lingered by the counter. Nicole says we should talk soon. About logistics. What logistics? You know. The house. Long-term stuff. I stirred my soup. We'll talk. Soon. He looked at me for a second longer, like he sensed something had shifted, but didn't know what. Then he left. I watched the spoon swirl in the broth. The rhythm calmed me. Everything was in motion now. But for once, I wasn't reacting. I was steering. The air was thick that morning. Humid. Heavy. The kind of weather that wraps around your chest and makes every breath feel deliberate. I'd woken early, like always. Watered the garden before the sun got too high, fed the birds, read a little of the paper. My hip had been bothering me the past few days, but I didn't think much of it, old bones, old problems. But as I was reaching up to fix a loose gutter bracket, something twisted sharp in my side. I remember the sky tilting. My foot missed the rung. Then the world dropped. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground, flat on my back, blinking up at the clouds. The neighbor's boy found me maybe 20 minutes later. Called an ambulance. I was alert, just bruised and rattled, but they insisted on taking me in for scans. At the hospital, a nurse asked who to list as emergency contact. My son, I said, and gave them Matthew's number. They called. Twice. He didn't answer. I stayed overnight. Nothing broken, just a few cracked ribs and a hairline fracture in my wrist. They wrapped me up and said I'd be fine after a few weeks of rest. I waited the entire next day. No call. No text. Not from Matthew. Not from Nicole. The nurse checked in again. Still nothing. I shook my head. She patted my arm. Some kids, they just forget. No, I said, voice thin. He remembers. He just doesn't care. That night, lying on a stiff hospital mattress, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the time Matthew fell off his bike when he was 7. Split his lip, twisted his ankle. I carried him 4 blocks home, his arms around my neck, sobbing into my shoulder. I held him all night while he whimpered in his sleep. And now, 35 years later, I was lying in a hospital bed, wondering if I even crossed his mind. The next morning, I signed myself out. The nurse offered to call a cab. I waved it off. I'd already arranged one. As soon as I got home, I didn't rest. I didn't lie down. I went to the filing cabinet in the study and pulled out every document I'd prepared with Mr. Lavin, the will, the clause, the trust forms, the house deed. I laid them all out on the dining room table, one by one. I read through each signature, each seal, each carefully chosen line of protection. Then I placed them in a new folder, marked it in black ink, in the event of dispute, refer to Lavin and Associates. I made 3 copies. One for Lavin. One for the safe deposit box. And one for me. That evening, I heard Nicole come through the front door, keys jingling, heels tapping against the hardwood. She stopped when she saw me at the table. "What's all this?" she asked. "Legal papers," I said calmly. "Making sure everything's in place." She narrowed her eyes. "In place for what?" "For what's coming," I said. "Sooner than you think." Matthew came downstairs later. He looked tired. Or maybe just annoyed. "You okay?" he asked, half-hearted. "I was in the hospital," I said. His eyebrows lifted, surprised. "What? Why didn't you tell us?" "I did," I said. "You didn't answer." He rubbed his neck. "I've been swamped. 3 days, Matthew. Not even a text." He had the decency to look away. But no apology came. Nicole walked back in. "Look, Henry. We're sorry. But this is why we've been talking about assisted care. What if you'd hit your head? What if no one was around?" "I wasn't asking for your concern," I said. "I'm informing you." "Informing us of what?" Nicole asked. I stood and walked to the side table. Picked up the envelope I'd prepared and handed it to her. "This is where things stand now. Read it. You'll want to." She opened it. Skimmed. Her face paled. "This isn't legal." "It is," I said. "Lavin filed it last week." Matthew grabbed it from her hands. "Dad, what is this? You're cutting us out?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "You cut me out. I just signed the paperwork." Nicole's voice rose. "You're making a mistake." I looked at her, steadily, evenly. "You already did." Matthew shook his head. "You're really doing this?" I nodded. "I gave you chances. You chose your priorities. Now I'm choosing mine." They stood there in silence. Not shouting. Not pleading. Just stunned. Good. Let them sit with that silence. It was the first moment in years I felt like I truly belonged in that house again. Nicole's birthday came 2 weeks later. They planned a celebration at the local golf club, reserved the patio, sent out digital invitations, and made a public show of how grateful they were for their supportive circle. I wasn't invited. Not directly, anyway. But I heard about it. Small town. Word travels faster than weather. Emily, my granddaughter, had mentioned it in passing when she called to check on me, a habit she'd picked up on her own, without anyone prompting her. "I think Mom's having some kind of fancy dinner thing. You going?" "No," I said. "I don't believe I was on the guest list." She hesitated. "That's weird." "I don't think it's weird at all," I told her gently. "I think it's honest." That night, I put on my only blazer, the one Marjorie bought me for our 30th anniversary. It was a bit tight around the shoulders now, but I wore it anyway. I polished my shoes. Combed back what little hair I had left. I tucked the documents into a leather folder and drove myself to the club. I walked in 15 minutes after the appetizers were served. Heads turned. Matthew saw me first. He stiffened. Nicole's face tightened, a polite smile forming too late. "Dad," Matthew said, standing awkwardly. I nodded. Didn't want to miss the big night. Nicole didn't speak. Just sipped her wine and watched me like a hawk. I walked calmly to the head of the patio, where the fireplace crackled behind a wall of ivy. I didn't need a microphone. My voice carried fine. "I won't stay long," I said. "But I have something I need to say." A few guests shifted in their seats. Others glanced at Nicole, unsure whether this was part of the plan. I spent the last 40 years building a life. A family. A home, I said. And recently, I realized something heartbreaking: not everyone who lives in your house belongs in your heart. Nicole stood up. "Henry, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I interrupted, holding her gaze. I pulled out the folder, opened it slowly, deliberately, and held up the first page. "This is my updated will. This is the deed to the house, legally transferred into an irrevocable trust. And this," I tapped another document, "is the clause that ensures if anyone contests it, everything goes to charity. Every last cent." Gasps. A woman near the back set down her fork. Matthew's hands clenched on the table. "I gave everything I had to this family," I continued, my voice steady, "and when I needed the smallest fraction in return, just a call, a visit, you both had better things to do." Nicole's voice rose, shaky now. "You're doing this to humiliate us?" "No," I said. "I'm doing this to free myself." Matthew stood. "Dad, come on. This isn't how we solve things." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I thought, when you left me in a hospital bed, wondering if my own son would bother showing up." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I looked at the guests, old friends, distant relatives, Nicole's polished social circle, and said, "You all can finish your dinners. But if you're here to toast Nicole and Matthew's future, do it knowing that it won't be built on my legacy." I turned and walked away. No one stopped me. Outside, the air was cooler. The night sky wide and silent. I drove home with the windows down. The house was dark when I pulled up. Nicole and Matthew were still at the club, probably trying to spin it, explain it away, repaint me as a bitter old man. Let them. I wasn't bitter. I was awake. I stood on my porch a long time that night. Listened to the wind rustle Marjorie's roses, watched the stars emerge one by one. The phone didn't ring. But I didn't expect it to. I'd said what needed to be said. And for the first time in years, I meant every word. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The next morning, the house was still. Still in the way that only follows a storm. No cars in the driveway. No footsteps overhead. Just the creak of the floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator, my companions now. I sat at the kitchen table, same as always, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee and listening to the birds fuss in the garden. For the first time in months, I felt no tension in my chest. No walking on eggshells. No waiting for Nicole's heels to click behind me or for Matthew to ask, "Can we talk about the house?" Nothing. just quiet. And it was beautiful. I didn't hear from them that day. Or the next. A few neighbors passed by on walks, giving me cautious nods, some tight-lipped, others with small, approving smiles. Word had gotten around. Paul came by the second evening with a six-pack of root beer and a folding chair. "Mind some company?" he asked. "Not at all." We sat on the porch for an hour, sipping in silence. "Eventually," he said, "heard about the birthday dinner." I chuckled. "Of course you did. You all right?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I'm not angry anymore." He nodded slowly. "Then you're doing better than most." When he left, he squeezed my shoulder. "You did what needed doing, Henry. Don't doubt it." But I did. Quietly, in moments. At night, mostly, when the wind whispered through the windows and the bed beside me stayed empty, like it had for the last decade. I'd roll onto my side and look at the space where Marjorie used to sleep, her hair fanned across the pillow, her breath soft against the rhythm of the clock. I missed her most in the silence. She would have known what to say. Or maybe she wouldn't have said anything at all, just made soup and held my hand. The third day, I took a long walk through town. The bakery girl smiled and waved. A man at the post office nodded. A couple I didn't recognize whispered as I passed. Everyone had an opinion. That much I knew. Some probably thought I was cruel, cutting off my own son, airing our family in public like laundry on a windy day. Others likely thought I'd finally grown a spine. But none of them had been there in the waiting room. None of them had sat alone in that hospital bed while the machines beeped and the nurse asked, "Are you sure there's no one we should call?" I stopped by the Veterans Memorial at the park. Sat on the bench and watched an older couple walk by, hand in hand. They nodded politely. I thought about the men I'd served with, gone now, most of them. Men who knew something about loyalty. About showing up. The breeze stirred the trees. For a moment, I felt Marjorie's presence again. Like she was sitting beside me, watching too. Did I go too far? I asked aloud. A squirrel darted across the grass. A leaf tumbled from a branch. No answer. Maybe that was her answer. When I got back home, a letter was stuck in the screen door. No envelope. Just a folded sheet of printer paper. I opened it. "We'll be moving out by the end of the week. Don't contact us. Nicole." No apology. No confrontation. Just like that, they were gone. I sat on the porch and read it again, just to be sure. Then I crumpled it and tossed it into the bin. That night, I made Marjorie's shepherd's pie, have the recipe, added too much time. But it was warm. And quiet. And mine. The following morning, I opened the windows and let the house breathe. A breeze rolled through, lifting the curtains like sails. I moved through each room slowly, touching the walls, running my fingers along the bookshelves. For the first time in years, it felt like my home again. Not a staging ground. Not a transaction. Home. Paul dropped by later that afternoon with his grandson, Jason, a lanky teenager with paint on his jeans and kindness in his eyes. They helped me take down some old furniture and carry out boxes Nicole had left in the garage. "You ever think of renting a room out?" Paul asked. "Not really," I said. "Why?" He shrugged. "Could be good company. Folks out there looking for a place to land." I didn't answer, but the idea stuck. That evening, I walked the garden path, my cane tapping softly on the flagstones. Marjorie's roses had bounced back from the trampling. Stubborn things. She always said, a real garden doesn't hold grudges. It just grows. I sat on the bench, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "They're gone, love. Just like you said they would be." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. Just, open. Ready. A week after Nicole's letter, I woke up with a strange feeling, not sadness, not quite peace either. Just, space. Room in my chest where grief used to sit like a stone. I made coffee and walked through the house barefoot, feeling the wood grain beneath my soles. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like a clean slate. Around noon, Paul knocked on the door with someone in tow. A woman, late 60s, with soft gray curls and calloused hands. "Henry, this is Anna," he said. "She's staying with her daughter for now, but she's looking for something more steady." Anna gave me a tired smile. "Paul said you might have a room." I didn't answer right away. I looked at her hands first, paint stains around the nails, like Marjorie used to get after gardening. Then her eyes. Kind, worn, alert. I nodded. "Come in. Let's talk." We sat in the living room with some tea, Marjorie's old blue teapot, still warm from habit. Anna told me she used to be a schoolteacher, retired 5 years ago. Her husband died last winter. Her daughter had 2 kids, a small apartment, and barely enough space to breathe. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "Just somewhere quiet. And maybe some purpose." I understood that feeling more than I cared to admit. "Well," I said slowly, "I've got quiet in spades. As for purpose, maybe we can figure that out together." She moved in 2 days later, just one suitcase, a stack of mystery novels, and a tiny radio she kept on low in the evenings. She cleaned her own room, cooked her own meals, but sometimes, she'd make an extra plate. We didn't speak much at first. But we didn't need to. One night, she knocked on my study door and said, "You ever think about opening this place up? Like a proper home. For people who need one?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean, like a boarding house?" "Not quite," she said. "More like a place with dignity. Not charity. Just, people helping each other." The idea stuck. That week, I called Mr. Lavin. Asked what it would take to convert the house legally, what forms I'd need. He laughed gently. "You turning into a landlord now, Henry?" "Not a landlord," I said. "A steward." We got to work. Permits. Applications. I spent 2 days clearing out the upstairs room Matthew had once claimed, tossed the trendy gadgets he left behind, boxed up the things worth donating. I repainted the walls. Replaced the old rug. Each stroke of the roller felt like reclaiming something lost. Anna helped me set up the guest room downstairs. She brought flowers in a little tin vase, placed them by the window. "Every room deserves color," she said. "Especially the ones waiting for someone." I smiled. Marjorie would have said the same. Word spread. Slowly, then all at once. A man from church stopped by, recently widowed, looking for a quieter space. A young veteran named David came to see the room after hearing about it at the grocery store. Said he didn't need much, just a bed and a place to work through some things. I told him we had plenty of both. He moved in a week later. The house came alive again. Not with noise, but with presence. Someone whistling in the kitchen. The radio humming. A laugh from the backyard. I hadn't heard real laughter in that space for years, not the polite, clipped kind Nicole brought, but full-bellied, honest joy. I started getting up earlier, making breakfast for everyone. David liked his eggs scrambled firm. Anna wanted weak coffee and toast with just a hint of jam. We started eating together. Talking. Sharing little stories. The space didn't feel haunted anymore. One afternoon, Emily came by. She stood on the porch, holding a bouquet of daisies. "Grandpa," she said, "Mom told me what happened." I waited. "She's upset," Emily continued. "But I'm not here for her. I opened the door wider. You hungry? She nodded. We ate in the kitchen, just the two of us. She looked around and said, "It feels different in here. Warmer." "It's not a house anymore," I said. "It's a home again." After lunch, she helped me clean up. She asked if she could come by more often. Maybe help with the garden. Maybe paint the shed. I said yes to everything. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. Anna joined me with 2 cups of tea. She handed me one and said, "You think your son will ever come back?" I shook my head. "I think he already left a long time ago. He just took a while to walk out the door." She nodded slowly. "And yet here you are, still standing." I raised my cup. "Here's to what's left." "No," she said. "Here's to what's next." And for once, I believed in that. There's a strange kind of peace that comes from knowing the worst is behind you, not forgotten, not forgiven, but behind you. That's how life began to feel in the weeks that followed. The house filled slowly, one heartbeat at a time. David stayed longer than he said he would. At first, he kept to himself, headphones in, eyes distant. But one morning I found him in the garage fixing the old snowblower without being asked. "Figured you'd need it this winter," he said, not even looking up. Anna turned the dining room into her craft corner. She crocheted little squares that eventually became blankets, one for each room. She'd hum softly as she worked, and sometimes, she'd hum the exact same tune Marjorie used to. It stopped me in my tracks the first time. I didn't say anything. I just let the memory sit with me a while. We didn't call ourselves a family, not out loud. But we started acting like one. There was a rhythm to it: dinner at 6, dishes shared, porch talks in the cool evenings. I began fixing up other parts of the house, the attic insulation, the garden path, even the tool shed. Every nail I hammered felt like a small act of defiance against what Matthew and Nicole had tried to erase. One afternoon, I came back from the hardware store to find a strange car in the driveway. A little blue sedan I didn't recognize. When I walked in, Emily was sitting in the living room with Anna, laughing over a photo album I hadn't seen in years. "Grandpa," she beamed, holding up a picture of Matthew when he was a toddler in a cowboy hat. "Look how serious he took his fake mustache." I chuckled. "He wouldn't take it off for 3 days. Even at bath time." She smiled but didn't say anything more about her father. She was here for me. I felt that clearly. Emily started coming by every Saturday. Helped with the garden. Brought baked goods. Listened to David's stories about his deployments, helped Anna organize her crafts for a church fair. She didn't live here, but she belonged here in a way that felt right. One evening, as we all sat on the porch with bowls of stew in our laps, she looked around and said softly, it feels like home here." No one responded right away. But David raised his glass of iced tea and said, "Then I'd say we're doing something right." Later that week, I went into town to pick up some supplies and ran into a woman from Nicole's social circle. She looked me up and down, then said, "I heard your son moved out. What a shame. That house was such an opportunity for them." I smiled politely. "It still is," I said. "Just not for the people who thought they deserved it." She didn't quite know how to respond, so she nodded awkwardly and walked away. That night, I told Anna about it. She laughed so hard she snorted into her tea. "You've got more backbone than a preacher's sermon," she said. I liked that. Not because I needed praise. But because it reminded me I was still becoming something new, even at my age. One Sunday, I sat with Emily on the porch swing. The roses Marjorie planted years ago were in bloom again. Bright red and stubborn. She used to call them our tough girls. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I think Mom and Dad are still mad at you." I figured as much. They say you turned your back on them. I sighed. Maybe I did. Or maybe I just stopped letting mine be walked on. She was quiet a while. Then she said, I don't want to pick sides. But I know what love feels like. And I feel it here. That did something to me. Broke something open gently. I wrapped an arm around her shoulder and said, you don't need to pick sides. Just show up where love is. That's enough. The house began to breathe differently. With each passing week, it became less about what had been taken, and more about what had been built. Real connection. Not perfect, not easy. But honest. Anna began calling it Marjorie's house. Said it felt right. I agreed. Not because it was sentimental, but because it was rooted in truth. Everything we were doing, every meal shared, every moment of healing, it all started with the love Marjorie and I built brick by brick, meal by meal. Matthew never came back. Not yet, anyway. But I stopped looking for his car in the driveway. Real family, I'd learned, isn't just the people who share your name or your blood. It's the ones who show up. Who make soup when you're tired. Who sit with you in silence when your heart is loud. Who remember how you take your coffee without being told. And in that house, our house, I was surrounded by real family. It was late October when I saw him again. The leaves had begun their slow tumble from the trees, turning the yard into a patchwork quilt of red and gold. I was on the porch, mug in hand, watching Anna sweep the path while David cleaned out the gutters. Emily was inside helping bake bread with one of Anna's friends. The house hummed with life, quiet, simple life. Then I heard the car. I didn't need to see it to know. The tires crunched too cautiously on the gravel. The engine idled longer than it needed to. When I finally looked up, there he was, Matthew. Standing at the bottom of the steps with his hands in his pockets. Hi, Dad, he said, voice low. I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee. He looked older. Tired. As if the weight of the silence between us had settled into his skin. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded toward the bench by the roses. Out of the way. He followed. We sat. Not close. Not far. Just enough space. He exhaled, looking at the garden. You kept Mom's roses alive. I did. They look better than I remember. They've had time to recover. He flinched at that, subtle, but I saw it. He rubbed his hands together. I didn't come to argue. Good, I said. I'm not offering one. He looked down. Nicole and I, we're not together anymore. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer knew what parts of his life were my concern. I've been thinking a lot. About what happened. About what I let happen. Still, I said nothing. He glanced at me. I failed you. That's not a small sentence, Matthew. I know, he said quickly. I know it's too late to fix things. But I wanted to see you. To say it, face to face. I looked at him then, really looked. There were pieces of the boy I raised still in there. The shape of his jaw. The way he glanced sideways like he did when he was nervous as a child. But there was also distance. Time. Damage done by both of us. I didn't want to cut you out of my life, I said. But I had to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't stop cutting. He nodded, slowly. I deserved that. We sat in silence. The wind stirred the rose bushes. A petal floated down and landed between us. I'm sorry, he said. I believed him. I think. But that didn't mean I owed him anything more than the space to say it. I appreciate that, I said. He looked up. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to. I don't know. See if there's still a door open. I looked toward the house. Through the window, I could see Anna dusting a shelf. David leaned against the doorway laughing at something Emily had said. There was warmth in every room. Not noise. Not obligation. Just presence. You walked past that door for years, son, I said quietly. It didn't close. You just stopped knocking. He bowed his head. I stood up. Slowly. My knees weren't what they used to be. This house isn't a throne. It's not a prize. It's not a punishment. It's a home. And homes have rules. I understand, he said. Do you? He looked me in the eyes. I do now. I nodded. Then you're welcome to visit. Not move back. Not ask for anything. Just, visit. His throat worked as he swallowed. That's more than I expected. Don't expect, I said. Just show up. We stood there a moment longer. Then he offered his hand. I took it. Briefly. Firmly. And then, just like that, he turned and walked back to the car. No tears. No dramatic ending. Just, a man visiting a place he used to belong. I sat back on the bench, watched his car disappear down the road, and waited for the ache to return. It didn't. Inside, the bread was done. Emily called from the kitchen, Grandpa, can you help me slice this? I stood, dusted my hands, and stepped back into the warmth. Whatever that visit meant, whatever it changed or didn't, I knew one thing. I hadn't closed the door. But I wasn't holding it open forever either. Do you think the father handled it the right way? Let us know in the comments. The morning of the opening ceremony dawned cool and bright, the kind of day that feels like a fresh page, unmarked and hopeful. I stood at the front gate, the ribbon stretched taut between two posts, scissors in hand. Around me, a small crowd had gathered, neighbors, friends, Anna, David, Emily, and a few others who had found their way here over the past months. It felt surreal. This house, once a battleground of silence and broken promises, was about to be reborn. Not as a symbol of loss or betrayal, but as a place of peace, purpose, and new beginnings. Emily stood beside me, her smile steady and genuine. She caught my eye and gave me a small nod. I cleared my throat. Thank you all for being here today, I began, voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. This house has been many things over the years, home, sanctuary, sometimes a place of pain. But today, it becomes something else. A home for those who need it, a refuge for those seeking connection. I gestured to the rooms around us. Thanks to the kindness of friends and neighbors, Marjorie's house will welcome veterans, widows, and anyone looking for a place to heal. A murmur of approval rose. I felt a warmth spread through me, not just from the sun, but from the hope in the crowd. I looked up at the house itself, the peeling paint touched with fresh color, the garden bursting with blooms Marjorie would have been proud of. I thought of her voice, soft and sure, reminding me that love is the soil in which we grow. I built this house with Marjorie, I said, and with every nail and every brick, we built a life rooted in love and resilience. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I paused, then added, and though life changed, and some who once called this place home have left, the spirit here remains. Marjorie's house lives again, not just in memory, but in every laugh, every story, every hand extended in friendship. Emily stepped forward, holding a small plaque engraved with the words, Marjorie's house, a place of peace and purpose. She placed it gently by the front door. Applause followed. Later, as people mingled, Anna told me how she'd already received inquiries from others who wanted to join the community. David talked about starting a small book club. Emily promised to bring her school choir for a holiday visit. It was more than I dared hope for. That evening, after the guests had left and the house settled into quiet once more, I stood in the kitchen alone. The soft glow of the lamps cast long shadows. I reached up to the top shelf and pulled down an old photo album. Marjorie's handwriting curled across the inside cover, "For the love that makes a house a home." I flipped through the pages, the black and white wedding photos, Matthew's first steps, birthdays and Christmas mornings. Each image a thread in the tapestry of my life. I whispered, "We did it, love. We finally made it home again." Outside, the wind rustled the rose bushes Marjorie had planted decades ago. The house stood strong, alive with the laughter of strangers turned family. And I knew, in my bones, that no matter what came next, this was where I belonged.